Hi, everybody. Professor H here. We are going to take a look at correlational research in this video. This has to do with our chapter 2. Alrighty. So correlational research, I'm going to go ahead and put this on slideshow so that it's a little bit bigger. Hopefully. Oops, maybe I have to go into this tab. Sorry about that. This is all a little bit new for me. Okay. Hopefully this turns out okay. All right. So correlational research is a type of research we use in psychology, along with some of the other things that we've talked about, and along with experimental research, which we're going to talk about in our next video. So correlation is in which we look at the relationship between two variables. So we are taking a look at how they relate to each other. Variables are behaviors, events, or other characteristics that can change or vary in some way. Correlational research does not indicate causation. So just because things are related to each other or have a relationship does not mean that one causes the other. Different types of correlations. As I mentioned in the other slide, correlation is the relationship between two or more variables. When two variables are correlated, one variable changes as the other does. It's not that one causes the change in the other variable. It is just that as one changes, so does the other. One of the ways we measure this is using a correlation coefficient. And we're going to look at that on another slide. The number can range from -1 to +1, with 1 on either end there being the strongest relationship you can have. So the further you are from 0, regardless of if it's positive or negative, the stronger the relationship is. We use the letter R, this little italicized R, to represent correlation coefficient. Okay, so a positive correlation is when two variables change in the same direction, both becoming either larger or smaller. So, for example, down here in our example with weight, as our height increases, our weight also increases. That's a positive correlation. So both of these variables are moving in the same direction. As one gets bigger, the other one also gets bigger. A negative correlation is when two variables change in different directions. One will become larger while the other becomes smaller. So for example, hours of sleep and tiredness. As the hours of sleep increase, the tiredness is reduced. So the more sleep you get, the less tired you are. That would be a negative correlation. The next one we want to talk about is when there is no correlation. When there is no correlation, we won't see any type of pattern forming on our graph here. So hours of sleep and shoe size. As the hours of sleep go up, does our shoe size go up? Well, no, we can see here that the data points are scattered all over this plot. Whereas with the other two, the positive correlation and the negative correlation, we can see that they have a linear form where they are trending up here and trending down here. These scatter plots let us know a visual representation of the data. Once again, correlation does not indicate causation. I can't say this one enough. Just because two things have a relationship does not mean that one causes the other. A cause and effect relationship means that a change in one variable causes the changes in the other variable. And that can only be determined through experimental research design, which we will talk about in our next video. In both correlational research and in experimental, there's something called a confounding variable. A confounding variable is an unanticipated outside factor that affects both variables of interest, often giving the false impression that changes in one variable causes changes in the other. Now, this is something, it's something that we didn't account for. For example, maybe we're doing some testing in a room and the temperature is varied It's not stable. Well, maybe what was the effect we were seeing was due to temperature and not due to the question that we're asking. And we do see that a lot. And we do really try to correct for that when we do experimental research. So with correlation, sometimes what we see is a third variable, something we hadn't accounted for, that could be determining that relationship. An example is, as ice cream sales increase, so does the overall rate in crime. A relationship exists between ice cream and crime, but it is correlation. It is a correlation. Or does one cause another? Well, no. We know that eating ice cream does not make you want to go out and like commit a crime. In this example, temperature is the confounding variable. As the temperature increases, ice cream sales go up, and we also see the statistic that people are more likely to be outside, and it increases the crime rates. So in the warmer weather, we see a rise in crime. We also see an increase in ice cream consumption. So we might see a scatter plot that would say as temperature increases, so does our crime. I mean, as eating of ice cream increases, we're seeing an increase also in crime rates when we're seeing both of those things happening. However, one is not causing the other. There's actually a third variable, which in this case is temperature, that is actually what is causing that relationship to go that direction. Does eating cereal really cause someone to have healthy weight? This is an example from your book. We're just blowing past that one. Illusory correlations. Wow, that's tough for me to say. As well as mistaking correlation for causation, people can also make false correlations. So we make mistakes in what things are really related. An illusory correlation is seeing relationships between two things when in reality, no such relationship exists. An example of that was the ice cream one. Okay. There may be we do see that at times when ice cream sales are up, we're seeing that crime is also increasing. But that's not telling us that the ice cream consumption is causing the crime, or the crime is causing the ice cream consumption. Another example of this would be a football fan believes if he wears a particular jersey, his team will win. If he doesn't wear it, they will lose. So this is an illusory correlation. It's not kind of a real thing. It's not a scientifically proven thing. It's just a relationship that it has mistakenly been made. Confirmation bias is a tendency to ignore evidence that disproves our ideas and beliefs. And as human beings, we all fall subject to confirmation bias. We do not like to take in information that is contradictory to the things that we already believe to be true or that line up with our current beliefs. It is very hard for people to take in information that does not agree with that. However, if I'm a football fan and I wear a particular jersey and my team wins, well, I'm going to that feeds into that confirmational bias. To me, I've seen that I wore the jersey and they won, so that I'm going to support that. If for some reason I wore the jersey and they lost, I might have some other reason for that. I might say, well, their kicker just had a bad day, but it's not my jersey's fault. Okay. So anyway, illusory correlations can be involved in the formation of prejudicial attitudes and can lead to discriminatory behavior. And we can talk about that in some of our later chapters. I believe that's in our social psychology chapter. We're going to talk a little bit more about these relationships and how we measure them. And once again, we measure them using the correlation coefficient, and that little r is what's representing that. So the correlation coefficient represents the strength and direction of the relationship between the variables. Now, what I mean by strength is how strong is the relationship. And we would see that by that line being kind of steep, that upward line of both variables moving the same direction or both variables moving in opposite directions. The direction of the relationship has to do with whether or not it is a positive relationship or a negative relationship. And this is very, very important because throughout psychology, when we talk about something being positive, we are not talking about it being a good thing. We are talking about it being something where a value would maybe increase, whereas negative would be something taken away or something decreased. Okay, so positive and negative are not talking about a good thing or a bad thing. It has to do with the numbers and directions. Okay, so our value once again can range from +1 to -1. So if I have 0.5, which is a negative 0.5, that's telling me that if, negative 0.5 would be a negative relationship. That would mean that as one variable increases, the other is decreasing. If I have 0.5, which is that positive is indicated, you don't have to write the plus, but you know it's there, right, with a 0.5. If I have 0.5 on my relationship for my correlation coefficient, that would mean I have a positive relationship, meaning that both of those variables are moving in the same direction. So as one increases, so does the other. That's what I mean by positive or negative. Positive, they're moving the same direction. Negative, those variables are moving in opposite directions. The positive 0.5 and the negative 0.5 relationships are exactly the same strength. So the strength of those relationships would be the same. It doesn't matter whether it's positive or negative. It matters how close they are to 1. If one of them was, let's say I had negative 0.75, that's a lot closer to -1 than 0.5 on the other side. So the negative this negative 0.75 would be a stronger relationship because it's a larger number. We're not really looking at it as a negative number or a positive number. We're looking at it as a number with either a negative or positive relationship. Okay, so that's something very important to remember. So as we go through psychology, when we say positive and negative, it does not mean good thing or bad thing. It has to do with directions and specific things that'll be clarified during that time when we talk about them. Okay, so a lack of relationship would be something close to 0. So if I had 0.004, I'd know that I basically have no relationship there. Maybe 1 point fell along the line somewhere randomly. The disadvantage is you cannot determine cause and effect relationships, but in psychology, there's a lot of things that we cannot test. We cannot experimentally put people into certain situations and do actual experimental research. So a lot of things we have to look at using correlational research because it would be very unethical to do research in other ways in some situations. All right, here's an example again about a positive correlation. You can see it as a linear relationship. It's going up and down like this. As the hour study gets bigger, so does the grade. So, at this 30 hours here, this person's at a 90 something, so they're at an A. The relationship here, when we talk about our correlation coefficient, we see that R equals 0.89. This is indicating a positive relationship, and we know that because there's no negative here. And because it is 0.89, that's pretty close to 1. So that makes it a very strong relationship. Here we have a negative correlation. Here we have, I couldn't change the wording on this, or I probably would have. So as a person becomes more intoxicated, their score or grade on a test would get lower. Okay, another example I could use is as temperature, let's say temperature is along this axis, we could put temperature here. As temperature increases, the amount of clothing worn would decrease. So we can have clothing worn, getting fewer items of clothing worn as the temperature increases. Anyway, with this example, we have our grade and our beers drank. We have a linear relationship. Once again, these are moving in opposite directions. As the beers increase, the grade decreases. We can see that line pointing down this way. Our correlation coefficient, it's a very strong relationship. Not as strong as the one that we saw a minute ago with like 0.84, but it's still 0.74, which is very strong. And this minus here is telling us it is a negative correlation. Here's our no correlation relationship. We have the grade in the course and toe size. So if you measure everyone's toe size and does that predict their grade? Basically, when we are looking at correlational research, we are looking for something that might predict something else. For example, we could predict when we're talking about this hours studied and grade, we can this gives us a bit of a prediction. If we see people that are studying a lot, we can expect their grade to be better. So this correlational research can give us a bit of a prediction, help us predict how behaviors are going to be, but it doesn't give a cause and effect relationship. So as we can see, toe size has no relation to grade. There is no linear pattern here. And the correlation coefficient was 0.06, which is very close to 0, which means that there is not much of a relationship there. All right, we're going to use this for an example. Does playing violent video games cause aggression? Well, we don't know from doing a correlational research. We can find that out in experimental research, which we'll talk about later. So if we're going to do a correlational study and we're going to look at the relationship between playing violent video games and aggression, we might say, what is the relationship between violent video game play and aggression? Let's suppose we found a positive correlation between violent video game play and aggression, whereas the time spent playing the video game, as that increased, so did the incidence of aggressive behavior. What does this tell us? Well, it does not tell us that playing violent video games causes aggression. It in no way tells us that. All it does is says that we found a relationship there. We found a positive relationship, meaning that the more hours spent playing the video game, the more aggressive behavior is being seen, according to our correlational study. However, we cannot say that other factors were not the causation. So correlation does not indicate causation. We know there's a relationship, but it's not that aggressive behavior causes you to want to watch video games that are violent, and it's not because violent video games are making you aggressive. We cannot determine that with this type of research. There could be other factors. Those third variables that we mentioned earlier could be involved. There could be somebody having violence in the home. It could be hyperactivity leading to more aggressive behavior. There could be mental illness involved. There could be a lot of different factors that play into that relationship between viewing violent video games and aggression. And in order to try to find any type of causal relationship, you would have to do experimental research. And we will look at that. We'll use this example in our experimental research section as well. So consider this. Scott has a theory that the amounts of caffeine he drinks make him a more productive writer. For 1 month, he keeps track of how much caffeine he drinks and how many words he writes each day. At the end of the month, he calculates the correlation coefficient, and the result is 0.89 with a plus in front of it. What pieces of information can he learn from this number? So I'll give you a second, or you can pause the video and think about that for a second if you wish. Okay, pleased with himself, Scott goes around and brags to all of his friends that drinking caffeine causes him to write more. Is his conclusion correct? Why or why not? So once again, we know that he is incorrect. We know that that his correlation, even though it is a strong relationship, does not indicate causation. There could be other factors causing this change in performance for him. So he would have to do an actual experiment to determine that the causation. Here he can just show us that it's a relationship. Okay. So this is the end of our correlational video. So we're going to go ahead and hopefully within the next day or so, I'll get the other one up for experimental research. So if you have questions, please feel free to shoot me a text, email. I can meet with you on Zoom. Just let me know if you need any help with any of this. Okay. And then we'll go from there. I hope this turns out. I'm flipping back and forth between one screen and another so that I can get to the controls. All right, you guys, I hope this is helpful. Feel free to give me some feedback and let me know what you think. All right, thank you and have a really good day.